I know so many people who think real estate is just about building wealth, but they're wrong. It can also rebuild lives. And you're gonna hear that today in this conversation with Vincent Palazzotto. He's gonna take us inside his journey from flipping and renting properties for profit to transforming them into sober living spaces that give people a second chance. You know, this isn't just a real estate story. This is a blueprint for turning your skills into something much bigger than yourself. Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. If you are new here, thank you so much for watching. I'm Linnea Carver. I am a strategist for high achievers who are tired of cookie cutter advice. My mission is to help you create a life that's both wildly successful and deeply fulfilling. And Vincent's story is proof that you absolutely can have both. So make sure to subscribe to stay in front of all of my upcoming content.
You know, here's how I look at real estate. It's the easiest small business to get into and just like dip your toe in, right?
Yeah.
Addiction is not Democrat or Republican issue, it's an American issue. And I think it might have been easier to do that because I would have known exactly what to do in renovating a house outside the regulations and learning some of those. Highest and best use, that's what Bill Zeckendorf used to say. So as you're looking at your real estate, think about what you could do to have them feel dignified, to have them to start to feel human again and lean into their passions again. And so that's what we've been able to create in this little city called Lancaster.
Let's dive in.
Wow, this is exciting. Yeah.
Well,
I mean, real estate's an easy thing. I talk about real estate all day. Now, addiction, gets a little, it's different, you know, different industry, new industry. But this real estate, I'm excited about. So.
But you can also talk about addiction too. I mean, because my audience, and we're just going right now. We're starting already. So my audience is a lot of, you know, considering we just talked about my subscribers, right? A lot of who I work with in the past is corporate executives. I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs. Obviously a lot of real estate agents, of course, but I would say the audience that we're talking to are the people who are like, I like to think of they're high performers. You know, they're people who are high performance. They want to be the top 1% in their area of expertise, whatever that is. And so they know that in order to get there, they have to think differently. They have to do differently. And I think your story is awesome, like talking about your transition, or really like your real estate investing, how you transition that into something that's kind of like a passion project. I think that's cool. So,
and it's still all real estate. You know, at the end of the day, like Zeckendorf always said, highest and best use. Like, look at your real estate as highest and best use. Mm-hmm. And, you know, a lot of people like to exit it from Airbnb. Like, you know, regulations changed in the city and they're like, I'm out. And they couldn't make those properties cash flow. And so that's really, you know, when you look at things from different angles, you know, it's expensive to sell real estate, especially when you've got great rates on it.
Introduce yourself, like, and how long you've kind of been doing what you do. Because you're everything. I mean, you have expertise in global strategy, operations, development. You've worked for companies like Merrill Lynch, AT&T, Comcast. I mean, some pretty big companies and some pretty big roles in that. And you know, and you've kind of taken that, like I said, like your passion for investing into like a totally different like community passion, which I think is really cool. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So Vincent Palazzotto, and real estate investor, entrepreneur, and dad. And at the end of the day, I think that those things really come together under the auspice of, you know, appreciating quality time with family first and putting that above all else. And then looking at ways to back into a lifestyle that allows me to spend time with friends and family. And real estate checked all those boxes really early on. But the passion for real estate, you know, a lot of people are like, so how'd you get into real estate? The reality is my mom and I always rented, and I was always intrigued by people who owned their homes and didn't have to move every year. You know, as a kid, you can imagine, you know, you're renting, you're moving. It takes a month just to get settled. So you're spending more than 10% of your year just transitioning, not to mention the transition that comes after. And so early on, you know, back in the day, I'm 52, but back in the day, there was a gentleman by the name of Carlton Sheets. And I can remember at like 16 years old when other kids were like, let's go to the beach. I was like, hey, Mom, there's a seminar. Could you drop me off? You know? And so I was so intrigued. And I can remember like, you know, coming to my mom and be like, I think, you know, I figured out a way that we could own our own home. And of course, my mom was, you know, blue collar worker, intelligent but non-educated, and worked, you know, anywhere between a job to 2 jobs at any given time just to make ends meet, like a lot of Americans are doing. And in listening, and I can vividly remember those infomercials coming on and Carlton Sheets and, staying way, way, way past my bedtime, like, with the TV down. This is before the days of iPads and, computers in bed and phones, so I'd have the infomercials on real low, and I'd be like, wow, I could figure this out, like at 15, 16. Fast forward into college, and really how I got into real estate was just renting rooms. For those young viewers that are out there and are looking to get started, you want to try something, go rent a house and sublet the rooms. And see if you can work yourself and make enough money to just offset your cost that you would be paying for rent.
So you started being a landlord without really being a landlord.
You got it. Yeah, I borrow. I didn't have the means to buy a home, but I did have good credit, and I knew I had the means, especially during that off season of college throughout the summer when everybody wants to sublet their apartments. I was only an hour from the shore here in Jersey, and I was like, wow. Absolutely, I could do that. I could be the middleman on that. And so I had done that for a couple of years, and that just translated over into my first home, being a young guy out in Colorado, 26, I think it was when I bought my first home.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, here we go again. I'll just rent out rooms. And it worked like clockwork. In fact, I think I had a 3-bedroom, and I made a 4th bedroom, like almost an apartment downstairs. And that one apartment that I had made downstairs, even though we were all sharing the same entrance and everything, it wasn't a separate entrance. But as a young guy, who cares? Like what you care about is that I got an extra $600 or $700 in my pocket versus paying rent, or even paying my mortgage. And I was like, wow, here I go. I got an extra $600-700, and so over the course of the first year, I saved that up. Not necessarily intending to invest into real estate, because at that point it was just, hey, I've got a home. I knew it was good to own a home, but I didn't know anything about investing, and that took a few years later. And quite honestly, it's scary. It's scary for people to go into business. I think that's the number one reason that people don't take action. Yeah.
I was talking to another, I talked to another person who she's really into investing too. She has 90 properties now. Yeah. I was like, I'm just fascinated. I'm like, because I think what actually drove me to like talking to you further was because you said something that's really so true. And you said most real estate agents are really good at helping other people build wealth, but they're really bad about themselves building wealth. And I think that's just, even if it's not real people in general, right? But the reason why real estate stood out is because, yes, as a real estate agent, that's what we do. We help people buy and sell homes. Like a lot of real estate agents, their tagline is, I help people build wealth through real estate, right? So
yeah,
like, I just thought it was kind of fascinating. And then I talked to her, and she said, like, one of the, this exact same thing that you just said was, it's really scary for people to get started. It's like,
super scary.
It's like, I don't know how, I don't know what, I don't know everything. So what do you, you got started renting rooms in a house that wasn't yours. So what advice would you give, what advice would you give to someone when they're looking to invest for the first time?
Here's how I look at real estate. It's the easiest small business to get into, and just like dip your toe in, right? And I'll give you an example. I had a dog shop. To open up the dog shop, I had to sign a long-term lease. It was $150,000 cash investment. No leverage. There's no leverage in your typical small business. But everything that I was reading, and I didn't read much at that point. There was just a few books that I had gotten into, but it was all about this leverage and using other people's money. And being a guy who didn't have a lot of money and a lot of resources, I was very intrigued by that. And so in thinking about using other people's money and just being able to dip your toe in, and I really started to look at it as an investment of not, my first investment property really was a second primary residence. I had moved out of my other house. I moved into that house. It took me about a year to renovate it. And I had that as a primary residence. And of course, as we know, primary residence is the best rate and the lowest down payment. Not 20% down, 25% down that we see for most investors, but we actually can, I think I got into that property. In fact, this is back in 09, 010, when they were still doing very aggressive loans where you could actually walk away with money in closing the home with closing costs and all the other, little perks that come along in the negotiation table. But I was like, wow, it's not that much of a risk. And in the event that it doesn't work out, how much am I going to really lose? And I bet you I'm going to learn quite a bit. And that's really how I got into it. And in being a little intimidated over, in looking at homes, like, what comes with a single family home, right? You got the single family homes, you got big yards, you got to find your own maintenance people. I actually opted to go into a townhome that had an HOA and took care of the outside maintenance and took that off my plate because I was still working full time. I was like, you know what? I don't have time to cut grass and outdoor painting and all that stuff. And I didn't know a lot of contractors, but what I knew how to do was put a contract together, meet with somebody, and sign a lease. And enforce the lease. Yeah. And that's really how it took off. It was just one property at a time. And people were like, I think 5 years later when I first started investing, they were like, wow, you went from one property to 42. How'd that happen? One property at a time. How do you eat elephant? One bite at a time. And there's not many businesses that you can just slowly ebb into them like that. But this real estate is that business. And for those people who are actually in the real estate business, wow, you already know about homes. Like, you're crawling all over them all day long, looking at them, fixing them, whatever area of making loans for them, whatever area of real estate you're in. Why don't you take the next step and just invest in them and join a few investment meetings and then take action?
Tell me a little bit more. Like, I want to know kind of like the other thing that intrigues me a little bit is about your history of working in corporate America. You had a job in corporate America, and then you decided to take the full plunge and jump into entrepreneurship. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I read a book early on, and I'm just going to share this with your viewers, and it's called The Weekend Millionaire Secrets of Investing in Real Estate.
Okay, I love that.
People love for you to have a job, unless you've just got unlimited, dollars sitting in the bank, which most people don't. They have very limited money, they're making ends meet, they're juggling a lot of things. Is that you want to have W-2 income. You're going to get the best rates, whether you're an investor, primary, whatever that is, you need to have a job. And so that book was turned on to me from an investment group, and I read that early on, and it's something that I share with nearly all my high school students that I've shared that with book. It's like my girlfriend's reading that book right now. Mm-hmm. Great book, and it makes it so simple. It's a fun read, and it shows you that you can just get into it one house at a time. And with good income and understanding using other people's money, whether it be the banks or in a bad market where people are sitting there wanting to sell the real estate and can't, man, are there opportunities then? And so that's really how I got into it, was taking a little bit of risk management. I was involved in acquiring different companies, and we were looking at those companies and what kind of value they would add into our business, whether it be when I was at Comcast specifically, they were on a buying frenzy of buying other telephone companies and internet companies and things of that nature to bring them under the umbrella of Comcast. And so that's no different than when we look at real estate, right? Is that we're building a portfolio, and it's that you want to build value and you want to create something that's going to create a return for you with the least amount of money out of pocket. And so when I had first gotten into real estate, because I had a job, I was quite happy if I had put some, in the neighborhood of 3 to 5% down on a home, which, let's say on a $200,000 property, fix up, maybe I was into it for $15,000 to $20,000, but I could easily see that coming back to me in, let's say, 3 to 5 years in small increments. Increments, if as long as it cash flowed out of the gates and I was receiving something, the fact that I had an asset that I knew at some point was going to appreciate, right? Even back in 2008 when things were going down, if you turned the clock and looked at 12, 13, there was definitely a spike up in the appreciation of values. And that's where you really make your money. And there's so many different mindsets to it, right? I mean, I know people who specifically look for foreclosures and get into the foreclosure market. The issue I have with foreclosures is that it's very, very, very hard targeting an investment area. And I think one of the things that people get involved in get hung up in is where to buy their properties. Something I had got turned on to very, very early on was a gentleman by the name of Bill Fitzpatrick, and he has 100 action principles, and I'm happy to share that link with your viewers. But man, it was like all about action. And he was a real estate guy. He was a real estate guy that was actually he was affiliated with Trump, and he talks about Bill Zeckendorf, who managed the Rockefeller real estate fortune. And they started talking all about highest and best use. and how to use other people's money and how to strategize. And the things that they talked about was that you can find 6 great properties right in your backyard. You don't have to find a property up in the mountains, out on the plains, in the downtown area. You want to find 6 solid properties that are in your backyard. And if you find those 6 properties in your backyard, guess what you're going to be able to do? You'll be able to build an economy of scale. You'll use the same contractors, the same contracts. If you have to evict somebody, you're going to the same court, so it all becomes familiar to you. Versus if you've got properties scattered across, let's say, 3 or 4 different counties, now just the regulations that you have to work through are difficult. Now you've got contractors that may not want to travel to the properties that go from east to west across your portfolio. And so really identifying properties that, again, are just in your backyard. And people think they have to find deals so far away, or I have to get on the internet and buy something out of state, or an hour away, or I'm going to buy a mountain property. Absolutely not. If it's not 5 to 10 minutes away from where it is that you reside and spend most of your time, I would just walk away from that and keep looking. Patience. You don't have to take a stab at every deal that comes your way. Make sure it's a good fit. And I think the fit always starts with location, 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 and the location to where you are, relevance to where the property is.
It's really interesting. You just said something that is really, really, really similar to the way I teach my people, my audience. And you said you don't have to chase everything. You don't have to chase every
Absolutely
property,
not.
right? You need to have, and that's the same with like whether I'm working with a real estate agent, entrepreneur, or whatever, and it's like their business, right? It's the same thing. You don't need to find business everywhere. You just got to find that one, right? And master that one. And like in your case, it's mastering the one in your backyard and then turning that into 5 and 6 and 7. Because when you think about it, your example of like, now you have a contractor who doesn't want to go to, the property that's 20 miles away. I mean, it's the same thing with like people in the business space altogether. It's like the more business you try to find in all the different areas, and rather than focusing on one thing, the more shiny objects and more problems you're going to have. Whereas if you just have the one, it's like you can learn the problems, you can learn to overcome them, and you can actually scale faster.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's so important. And you don't want to complicate your business, right? I mean, you want to, and I'm not saying don't go into different counties or different states, but don't start with that mindset. Start with things that are in your backyard. You can manage them. You could check in on them if you're coming back from work. One of the things I had loved as I started to build my portfolio, and in the beginning, I did have some properties scattered, and they really became outliers and almost like redheaded stepchildren. You're like, oh my goodness, I've got to go sit in traffic. And, what should take, by way the crow flies, you're like, oh, that should take like 20 minutes, but traffic, it's an hour and 20 minutes. That is not going to be something you're going to want to do after working 8 to 10 hours a day and, working and helping your kids and want to have some, free time. So don't complicate it. Keep it in your backyard. There's deals to be had everywhere, and become an expert in your backyard first. And if you become an expert in your backyard and you start to acquire those 5, 6, 7, 8 properties, and you want to branch out, well, branch out and identify a new county or a new municipality to do that in, and don't go in the mindset of, oh, wow, you know what, let me go into the state of Arizona and have some up in northern, southern, and central, and again, complicated. Unless you're planning to take on the entire state of Arizona and hire 5 different property managers and maintenance workers to handle that, don't complicate it.
What types of real estate investing are there? I mean, I know like fix and flip. You mentioned foreclosures, which I assume is very similar to fix and flip, or fix and hold, or buy and hold. And like, what sort of how would you describe the different types of real estate investments that people can make?
I think the most important investment, and let's take a step back, because there's a myth out there, right? You buy a new car. Mm-hmm. They sell it to you as an investment, right? We would all agree there's marketing out there everywhere to let you know you buy a car and this is an investment, protect your investment. That's all you hear. Meanwhile, this is depreciating.
Right.
Now, here's what happens in the world of real estate. People hear, they talk to their agent, they're like, yeah, of course you want to buy. It's an investment. It is an investment. Absolutely, it's an investment. But it's also a liability. Now, what do I mean by that, right? Is that we all have X amount of dollars, and the way that the bank lends on the money that you make, they'll lend right up to about 43, 44, 45% is what we're seeing in debt to income ratio. And so what does that mean? All your debt that you're required to pay every month, not your electric bill, not your water bill, but your debt that hits your credit report, your credit card, student loans, child support, as well as your mortgage. That counts into that debt to income ratio of about 45%. So if you make $10,000 per month, you can have about $4,500 in debt that they will allow you to lend on to include your new mortgage. When you buy your primary residence, people are so excited. They're like, look, I got an investment. And what do most people do? You as a realtor probably know best, is that people try to push it right to that 43% limit, right? They might start out at 35 and like, this is our budget, but then they see a house, it's sparkly, it's new, it's perfect. It's perfect. It checks all the boxes except their budget. And people, this is where people get into trouble. They're like, look, I bought this beautiful home. I went a little bigger on it, right? I got the bells and whistles with it, upgraded the kitchen, and they're right at that DTI to where they can't borrow anymore. Now, here's the problem with that, is that you still have a balance sheet, a personal balance sheet that you have to cover every month. And even though you have an investment that's appreciating, it's still a liability against your income. And so how do you mitigate that? And so the best way to mitigate that is Fannie and Freddie will allow you to buy not a single family home, but they'll allow you to buy up to a fourplex using it as a primary residence. And the beauty of that is you can get into your first, not just your first primary residence, but you can also get into an investment private property simultaneously for the best rate. And now you've got, let's say, 1, 2, or 3 other units in a duplex, triplex, or quadplex that you can now rent. Now, I know what your listeners are saying. They're going, oh, yeah, but Vince, I'm going to have to live next to those people, and, I'm going to be like super hands-on, and if there's a problem, they're going to be right there. Yeah, this is your business. And there's no better way for you to get started than buying a duplex, triplex, or quadplex and having those tenants right there, because you're going to get to understand your business. You're going to be on top of it. You're going to be able to manage things right there. And you know what? You only got to do it for a year. Only got to do it for a year. And guess what? After that year is up, you don't like it? Great. You sell it, you get out. But if it's for you, and you'll know after a year, is you are going to look at the cash flow of that 4th unit that you've been living in. You're going to rent that out, and you're going to go look for a new primary residence. And guess what? Now you've got 4 units under your belt, and all you did is buy one house. One deal. You did one transaction that gave you 4 properties. And instead of having this huge debt to income, right, this property that's now sucking you dry because, oh, wow, look, I've got this beautiful single family residence, and it's taking every penny that I can borrow. And now I can't borrow anymore. Now you've got a strategy to come in. Now you're only sitting because you've got income off the other 2, 3, or 4 properties in that triplex, quadplex. Now you can offset, right? The bank's going to use that to offset, and your DTI may only be sitting at 20, 22, 25%. You've just cut it in half. And so I would encourage anybody that's looking out there as a first-time home buyer to save just a little bit more to get at least a duplex. At least a duplex.
House hacking. That's called house hacking. And that's actually someone else that I talked to. That's what she did. Her first investment property. She was like, I just house hacked. We bought a duplex. We rented out the duplex. And then we rented out the other side of it. We fixed up the one we were living in. And we rented out the other side. And she was like, and then we held on to it. And we bought a next house. And that's how she did it. Have you found, because you've been doing this for a while, have you found certain types of certain times that are better to invest than others? And I'm specifically asking because right now the real estate market is shifting more into the favor of buyers. We are starting to see homes across the nation sit a lot longer, with interest rates being somewhere around, today probably 7.5% on average. I mean, I'm, just pretending. I don't know what it'll be when this actually posts, but with that, are you seeing that now is a good time to invest? Like, you as an investor, we'll get to what you're doing with your current investments in a minute, but as an investor, are you looking at this as an opportunity to be like, okay, this is a really good time to invest?
I'm always looking at the market, and there's something that I look at. I'm drawing a blank on his first name, but Burry. What he was doing is he was studying the foreclosure, the default rates. Now, I know what you're saying is, how do I go study the default rates? I'm sure with ChatGPT.
Michael Burry. Michael Burry.
Sorry. Yeah. And if you have not seen The Big Short and you're thinking about getting into real estate, that's a must watch, because there are bubbles and there's predictors out there. And Michael was very, very, very apt at studying those predictors and looking at the mortgage-backed securities that packaged all the loans that were subprime. And so back in the day, what was happening, why we saw such a blip back in the day, was that people weren't putting anything into their homes, right? They were literally walking away with money on their first time home purchase. They were adjustable rates. And when the market shifted, which it was shifting down, right, they went bankrupt. They couldn't afford the payment. They lost their jobs. Unemployment in Colorado was about 25% in certain zip codes. And it was a struggle for a lot of people. They just walked right away from their homes. We're seeing that right now. One of the things that I watch are the VA foreclosures. Mm-hmm. And people might go, wow, VA foreclosures, how do you watch that? There's a site out there called VRM Properties, and they manage all the VA foreclosures for the Veterans Administration. And here's my thought process on that. If you have veterans, right, that have pretty stable jobs, they're receiving loans at a great rate with no private mortgage insurance. They're veterans. People want to hire veterans. I've been watching this number over the last 6-7 months or so. And literally, back in 2008, let's go back to 2008. 2008, there was probably 1,500 to 1,700 foreclosures nationwide through the VA that anybody could buy. People were like, oh, wow, you got to be in the VA, but got to be a veteran to be able to purchase those. Absolutely not. That's a whole nother session. But what I'm watching is that number tick up right now. And so if I was to turn back the clock in January, maybe there was about 40 or 50 foreclosures nationwide. If you were to look at that site right now, I bet you there's just over 400 of them. Now, 400, that's about a third of where we were at back in 2008. And so what's causing that right now? Inflation, people burning through savings, jobs, loss of jobs. The reality is, if even people with homes, most people don't have more than a month's worth of savings. And so what do they start doing? You can't pay a mortgage with a credit card unless you're actually pulling money out off your credit card, which a lot of credit cards don't allow you to pull large sums off of them like they used to. Those laws have changed as well. And so I think what we're going to see as we move through is a lot of opportunity in real estate, and a lot of opportunity to structure deals where you could come in and either assume the debt, which you can on a VA note, or structure a deal to where the seller may actually walk away with a little bit of a loss, but you walk away with a win. So
yes, it's a good time.
It's a good time. It's a cautious time, because I think that there's going to be deeper deals. Now, of course, the interest rate is you've always got price and interest rate, and they affect each other. Mm-hmm. Terms and the types of loans we're starting to see 40-year loans come onto the market, mm-hmm. Which lowers people's overall payment. But the interest rates, right? The interest rates is your overall indicator, and of course, right now we have an administration that's pushing Mr. Powell to push those rates down, which of course he is not obligated to and does not work for the current administration. So there's a bit of a conflict there. Mm-hmm. And then the other piece of it is, we're kind of locked into this. A lot of people have great rates on the existing properties that they bought, let's say, anywhere between 6 and 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so, I've got a couple of properties where I'm actually below 2%. But I'd say the average than anything that I was purchasing back then is probably sitting around 3.5. Yep. Right now we're at 7.5, and so for anybody that knows what it costs to borrow money, that's a big difference. That's double. Same 100,000 4 years ago cost you double to borrow it today, and that's a big difference. If we can get the interest rates down, I still think that there's an issue with the underlying fragility of good paying jobs, and the other underlying issue of people having a lack of savings, which will drive deals in the market.
If you're inspired by the idea of building a business that serves both your bank account and your bigger mission, I want you to grab a free strategy session. In just one call, we are going to map out how to scale your business without burning out and start thinking about your highest and best use, just like Vincent. You can book it at the link in the description below.
That's interesting. I agree. I think just from what I'm noticing in buying patterns, because I pay more attention to buying patterns and like what people are actually, and I'm definitely noticing a lot more caution being used. I'm seeing just buyers in general they're thinking, they're doing a lot of thinking. They're not acting nearly as quickly because, and I think if the rate, obviously, I sold houses in 2020. So when I was selling houses in 2020, people didn't have to think. They just bought, right? And then today, of course, they're taking a lot longer to think. So whenever I see people's thinking patterns change, that's kind of like my indicator of where things are going. Because, you have people being really cautious, making sure they're making the right decision. And then you have the sellers who are still thinking that we are in a market like we were 2 years ago, really.
Yeah, which we are not.
We are not in that market.
We are
anymore.
not.
And they're like sticking their feet in the sand, wanting certain things, and it's just not really that way. So I definitely see opportunity. When I see this happen, I see investment opportunity, because I do see some sellers are going to go into foreclosure because they don't want to sell their house because they think that it's worth more, so they'd rather just sit in it and wait, versus selling it and maybe netting zero, and they'd rather just like see how long they can last. To all the reasons you mentioned: no cash, income's down, inflation's up, jobs are down, all those things. So I would agree that I think it's a very cautious time for whether or not people are looking for investment or primary residence, because I work with both investors and people buying their primary residence. But yeah, I would totally agree with that statement. I like that you're of it though.
What's interesting, I know as from an agent perspective, you're always looking at amount of inventory and the time it takes to sop up that inventory, right? And so I don't know what you're seeing there in Washington. Do you know what it is off the top of your head?
Well,
right now?
I know right now. I know right now based off of where my active listings are, right? So not every market, no, but on my active listings, we're looking at about an 84-day turn time, which is
day. And I bet you if you turned that around about 2 years ago, it was probably like a 2-week turn time, 14 day, right?
less than 2 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a huge indicator, as well as how long time properties are actually sitting on the market. And for those viewers, that have a property, great opportunity. If you're looking to move, right, and you've got a property that has equity in it and you've got a great rate, that's a great opportunity to become a landlord.
Right, hold on to it.
Right. Borrow money, take out a HELOC before you move out of it. Have it open, a 10-year line of credit against your property. You can borrow against that. Use it for fix up of your new property, or whatever, pay down your debt if you want to get your debt to income ratios down, and structure that so that your high interest high payment debt is managed underneath a longer term fixed plan, or usually a HELOC, but it's tax writable, right? That's tax writable, and you're not letting go of that great rate. I mean, let's just think about it. If you're sitting on 7% and you've got something at 3%, that's free money, And what a lot of people, especially for even people my age, we've never seen 9% rates. But one of the things that I was like, it sticks in my head. It's like cemented in there. And I was out in Washington. I was visiting, what's the volcano that blew up out there? Mount St. Helens, right? And I was at the visitor center. And at the same time that was happening, the front page of the New York Times was that interest rates had hit an all-time high, and that all-time high was sitting right at about 21%. Now imagine that, borrowing money at 21%. People in Russia, people in a lot of countries know exactly what that is, but here in the States, we've always had AAA credit as a country. Our borrowing as the bank at the bank level, from the Federal Reserve to the bank, is at an all-time low, really, in the grand scheme of it, even at 6.5–7%, because the average is about 9%. Now, I've never seen 9% in my investing term, but I don't think it's out of the question in the next few years. And of course, if that happens, you are going to see prices fall on the real estate, because people can only afford so much on a monthly payment unless all of a sudden they create a 50-year loan, which is what we see in Japan and places that are hot markets with very, very, very little inventory.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in order for that to happen, in order for people to buy at a 9% interest rate, because even at a 7.5% interest rate now, it's high. I mean, my house today, if I were to have to buy it at a 7.5% interest rate, I probably wouldn't buy my house. Right, the house I currently live in, right. I have it.
No, you'd be buying a much smaller house,
a much different house. I have a 3%. I have a 3% interest rate, and I have plenty of equity in my house. So it's like I'm sitting here and I'm like, well, I'm gonna make that equity work for us versus just letting the equity sit there, because it's not gaining anything just sitting there. But if I were to buy my house today with today's rates, I wouldn't buy this one. Now, if today's rates will go to 9%, right? I don't think people are going to be buying. I actually think it's going to limit the number of buyers to. I mean, like in order to afford, I would say average price point in my area is around $800,000 right now. So in order to afford an $800,000 house with even 3.5% down, because FHA can go up that high, even 3.5% down, you're looking at a payment on $800,000 with today's rate. I would think, I'm not a loan officer. This is not run. This
North
is
of 4,000.
You're looking at a little more than that, I would think.
And taxes are probably running about 8,000 a year in Washington.
Yeah, something like
$800,000
that right
house, something about that.
Yeah. So in order for that, you have to at least make around $150,000 to $200,000 a year. And that's just not the average for what people are earning in this area, right? Because the average for what people are earning in here is, they're saying 75,000. But it's just kind of interesting how it all kind of plays out. And talking with investors, I like to learn how investors look at the market, because it's different than someone buying a primary.
It's totally different. And as an investor, I just want to hit a key point here for your viewers, is that if you are going to invest in real estate, there's three ways that you make your money, right? You make it on appreciation, depreciation, and cash flow. Am I missing? I don't think I'm missing anything. Maybe there's another way, but those are pretty much the three ways that you make your money. And for people that have high earners, because there are viewers out there that make plenty of money, and they're actually looking at this from a tax sheltering standpoint, and that's a great reason to get into real estate as well. If you're going to go pay the government $250,000 in taxes, and you're a high earner, let's say above $1 million, not even if you're over $500,000, you're still giving the government at least $100,000. So there's a great way to just offset that, and it's of course through depreciation, through your fix up. But now we've just had something through the TC. I think it's I may slaughter this, but it was during COVID, and it was basically to stimulate the economy. It was like TCNJ, I think is what the act was. It just came back under the big beautiful bill, and I'm not a huge fan of the big beautiful bill because of the nature of the money that's there. But from a real estate perspective, I'm very much a fan of it.
Okay.
And if you want to really get into how you make your money with regards to tax savings, you're going to want to read this book here. And Nolo publishes a great book specifically for landlords. It's called Every Landlord's Tax Deduction Guide.
Okay.
This is a super easy read. And what this is going to do is give you the ability to have an intelligent conversation with your accountant. Not all accountants are real estate based. If you're thinking about getting into real estate, or if you are in real estate already, make sure your accountant understands and has a good foundation in real estate taxation and the loopholes that exist for you. And I say loopholes, people frown at the word loophole, but these tax laws change every year or every other year or however often they change them. And this book comes out and identifies what those laws are so that you can take advantage of them. And so one of the things that just came back is bonus depreciation. And people are like, oh, bonus depreciation, heard about it. Are you familiar? Have you heard of bonus depreciation? And so bonus depreciation, right, really allows you, rather than depreciating the asset over 27 and a half years, or I think it's a different schedule if it's commercial, it's like 39 years, I think is what it is for commercial. But rather than taking 39 years or 27 and a half years to depreciate your asset, you could take it all in one shot. And so what does that do? It immediately gives you cash in your pocket to offset your tax base, because now you've got this huge deduction. So let's think about it like this. You buy an $800,000 home. Let's say you buy five. Let's go a little lower. I might intimidate people with $800,000. Let's say you buy a $500,000 investment property, right? Now the land value, of course, is undepreciable. That's $100,000. But now you've got this $400,000 asset plus your fix-up costs. So let's say you put it into service for $425,000 worth of depreciation. You could take that in year one. Right now, that's just changed for 2025. If you've purchased a property anywhere from January 2025 for the next several years, I believe, and don't quote me on that, but at least this year for sure, it's 100% you can take immediately. So if you're about to pay $425,000 of income tax, you can offset that 100% and pay nothing. And so rather than writing a check for $100,000 to the government, you put that $100,000 back in your property and you do it all over again. Sounds too good to be true, but I'm telling you, this is a strategy that you can work alongside what's called I'm going to forget the name on this as well, but it's a cost segregation study.
Got it.
So you hire a cost segregation company, you come in alongside your CPA, he blesses it, and you go to work with more money in your pocket to buy your next asset. Great way to fix and hold.
Got it. Okay, cool. I want to know, now, I want to talk about what you're currently doing with your investment. Because the last, I think maybe year or so, is that what you said? I think you told me about it last year, maybe two. You've kind of pivoted a little bit because you had some Airbnb properties and it's not really a pivot. You're just using your properties that you already have in a way to actually serve the community. And I think
it's a total pivot.
Yeah. Well, okay, so you're not buying properties. You're using the properties you already have. It is what it is. But I think that's really cool, like what you're currently doing with your properties. And it's also cool to kind of show people, like, look, this is what you can do when you own these. Like, you're not just investing to buy properties and make money. Of course, that's part of it. But like, now you're actually doing something with them that's actually serving the community. And I love that piece of it.
Wow. Yeah. So for anybody that's out there and has been considering Airbnb, I had transitioned 1031 quite a few of my properties into downtown Denver properties prior to COVID. And for anybody that may have followed the Airbnb saga of regulations and cities kind of backlashing against the model for whatever reason, there's multiple reasons. But what we've seen is the Airbnb has basically been clamped down on. And so being heavily invested in Airbnbs, which I love tourism, I love travelers, I love, creating a space and furnishing them and having somebody come into a home. It's like one of the most rewarding things in my world. And so what had happened right around COVID is the city of Denver came in and said, listen, you know what, if it's not a primary residence, you're not going to be able to short-term rent it. You can long-term rent it 30 days or more, but you're not going to be able to short-term rent it unless it's a primary residence. And of course, there was quite a few people, and I'll put myself right in there. I was a little aggressive, and I said, how are they going to know? Guys, they're going to know. They buy software. They're tapped in. The cities are tapped into they're going to know. Don't go down the road thinking they're not going to know, because any major metropolitan city that has Airbnb laws right now, they have software that can monitor all those homes. But that's a whole aside. And so what I was given an opportunity to relinquish my properties underneath an Airbnb. But unfortunately, an Airbnb model is a much different model, cash flow model, than a traditional rental model. And so most of the properties that I had owned downtown Denver, I had to sell because they just wouldn't cash flow. Even on a 30-day furnished rental, they just weren't going to cash flow. Break even, maybe, but I wasn't in this to break even. And at this point in life, I was very much living off of a lot of the cash flow that I was receiving from these short-term rentals. And so throughout COVID, I had scoured the market and found myself right back where I grew up, was just right outside of New Jersey in this little tiny town called Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And I was super excited to get there. A good old childhood friend of mine was there, and the town was just blossoming. An hour outside of Philly, Amish country, beautiful farms, and a really, really vibrant downtown that I would kind of align with maybe like a city like Boulder,
okay,
smaller Boulder. And just these beautiful properties from the 1700s. And I was like, wow, this is going to be just the perfect place to do Airbnb. No laws. What could go wrong?
The second you ask yourself that question, that's when you know everything can go wrong.
Everything can go wrong. Long story short, a few months after buying those properties, and I think where it really was the nail in the coffin is I had bought these two beautiful historic homes on the same block, and the residents of that block started protesting, and they got active, and they changed the laws in the city of Lancaster. Now, lucky for me, there was grandfathering, and so that did help me a little bit. But I really knew that the city did not, and the people in the community really did not love Airbnb. And so my first piece of advice for your viewers is do not get in. If you are considering Airbnb and going into the Airbnb market, short-term rental market, make sure that the laws are in place and that you're doing everything above board. Do not purchase anything, ask 800 questions, and then some. And make sure the regulations that they have in place are like 95% complete. And if they are going to change anything, it wouldn't be anything that would require you to sell the property because of a catastrophic change that would affect your business, which is what happened in my world. And so imagine transferring about $5 million of property in a small, beautiful little enclave, and you're so excited about Airbnb, and as you've got this business just humming, all of a sudden everything starts crumbling around you. And so you've really only got two options. You can sell it, or you can figure out another use for it. Simultaneously, what I had going on in my personal life, and for those touched by addiction, this may resonate with them, but I had several people that were lost either to fentanyl, alcohol, or suicide, and it was more than disturbing in my world. I had an uncle who had led a men's program up in Times Square Church in New York City, and he had suggested sober living. And I said, sober living? What's that? Just like that, I had no idea. And he goes, sober living, it's, a community of people. It's federally protected by the federal government. They share a meal once a week, and they come in and you have people live there that encourage each other to live in a sober environment. Usually when somebody comes out of a detox environment, or may have been, maybe a loved one is just like had enough, or maybe that they just decided to make a change. It's a great environment to be able to put yourself in, to be able to establish a great foundation in sobriety. And when I started to learn about this, I was like, wow, this is awesome. Like, I get emotional about it because it's awesome thinking about that you've got a house and you've got something in real estate and something that you're passionate there, and it's already furnished, right? And now you're going to open this house up and you're going to be able to give something to people to have them feel dignified, to have them to start to feel human again and lean into their passions again. And so that's what we've been able to create in this little city called Lancaster. And it's positioned right in between like New York, DC, Philly. So it's a great little place that's disconnected, but not too disconnected, for family, friends, and people like that to come by and support them. And so that's exactly what we're doing now, is that we've pivoted that into Porchlight Recovery. And Porchlight Recovery has just been a passion project of mine. Right now we have a men's and women's home open, serving 24 beds. And it is a little bit like herding cats, but it still allows me to be in real estate and has opened up this new part of my life of really, really being able to provide a space for people to heal. And how awesome is that? How awesome is that? Yeah. It's truly awesome.
I always look at it as like, if you're going to do something to impact your life positively, you have to give back. The universe did that for you, right? The universe put all those opportunities in place, and you're the one who said, yeah, okay, I'm going to take advantage of this. And so now you have to give that back. You have to pay that back, right? You don't have to. It's like the universal law of giving, though. It's like you were given an opportunity, and now you're using that opportunity to serve a very, very, very important need that I don't think people realize is actually like, we have a major opioid crisis in this country, major drug crisis, right? Yeah. And so like, you're actually combating that, like, not you're not out in the trenches being like fight, you know what I mean? But you're serving that need to be as a country need, and making the country better one bed at a time. So I think it kind of ties it all back into your buy a new house, one house at a time. And now you're like giving back one bed at a time. And I just think that's really powerful and really inspiring.
It's super inspiring, and it blends two passions. My passion for humanity and my passion for people to want to take action in their own life. If you're not willing to take action in your own life, who are you going to take action for? You won't do it for your daughter, your son, your wife, your husband, your friends. You won't do it. So it's an opportunity for people to start to take action in their own life, accountability, and make a change. And for some, just really have a sense of feeling human and to wash away that guilt, but also feel that they're doing it in a safe environment. When I first got into sober living, what I saw in most people that get into sober living, I think that they get into it for the wrong reasons. They see it as an opportunity to make money. They buy a house in the worst section of town, usually right across the street from a crack den. And I'm painting a picture that sounds terrible, but this is the reality. If we were to look at Lancaster or down in Philadelphia, most of your sober living homes are in terrible neighborhoods. They are certainly not in a neighborhood that I would want my loved one to go to. And when I started to look at it, our model is different in the sense of it. The cost model is different. They're supervised. We're state licensed facilities. We're a member of the National Association of Recovery Residences. So we have all this oversight. And the thing that I heard when we first opened up the houses to these agencies to look in, and they're like, Vince, this is amazing. Like, can I stay here? and you just know that like, and of course they were Airbnbs, like we designed them around an experience, a tourist coming in for a wedding, but man, it just transitions right over into dignified, sober living for people. When you see people show up for the first time, like we don't know everybody's backgrounds, right? And we're not like, oh, this isn't like, there's no, it's inclusive of all. In fact, as we turn on other homes, we're very excited about having an LGBTQI house, a veteran and first responders home, and really being encompassing of what our community is. Addiction is not Democrat or Republican issue; it's an American issue. Yeah. And Lancaster is an American city where people come into, and it's a community. Although they do not embrace Airbnb, they absolutely embrace recovery, and it's so exciting to be a part of. And just as I was like really on the fence. In fact, I was living in Portugal and Spain, and I was like, wow, I could just sell it and renovate a really nice house in Porto is where I was looking. And I think it might have been easier to do that because I would have known exactly what to do in renovating a house outside the regulations and learning some of those. But man, the addiction piece has been so inspiring to see people who just completely turn around their lives. And when you see a loved one, when you see somebody come in and they haven't seen them for a few months, and it's usually kids, they're so forgiving. And they just want their dad, they just want their mom, they want to be reconnected. And to know that these houses are doing that, wow, it's like that is such an intrinsic, off-the-wall reaction that I never expected to really have. But it's one that we're experiencing today. And it's a way that you can use real estate in so many different ways. Like, hey, you're excited about real estate, you open up a children's hospital. If you've got the deep pockets and you're looking for a great write-off, maybe you could buy a big building or an office space, and you could do great things with it. Highest and best use, that's what Bill Zeckendorf used to say. So as you're looking at your real estate, think about what you could do with it.
Yeah.
Don't just let it fall flat, and don't let it be in your mindset of, oh, well, I'm going to buy a residential house, I'm going to rent it and go for the lowest hanging fruit out there of, I'm just going to rent it on a 12-month lease. There's so many creative things that you can do with it. And I see people doing it all the time. Heavy, right? It is kind of heavy because
I think I'm just kind of like, it's like, I love to be surrounded by people who think bigger. Right. That's like this whole YouTube show, this whole YouTube channel that I'm reading. Is all about putting myself in the same room with people who are thinking above and beyond the norm. And, people who want to scale to that next level. And for you, when you just said, I could have probably much easier to just buy another property because I know what I'm doing, right? You basically going back to your own action principles that you just talked about. You're like, I'm going to take action in my life because I don't want to do the same thing. I don't want to do the same, even though I'm really good at it. Obviously, I don't need to prove to myself I'm good at it again. Now I'm going to learn this new skill of connecting with people on a different level, of solving a problem at a different level. And I just think it just goes to show about you as a human, your 1% mindset.
I think it's contagious. I think that, and surround yourself. People are like, you will. Self-doubt is a cancer. Mm-hmm. We all have self-doubt, and I remember early on, and still today, I can feel it. You feel it creeping in. Surround yourself with good, positive people. Yep. One of the things I used to, when I was teaching high school business, I used to tell my students, if you've got somebody alongside you that when you're about to go try something or try out for something, or you want to go do something, they're like, oh man, I don't know. You're going to be a cheerleader? You're a dude. Oh, real estate, you're going to invest in real estate. I hear a lot of people fail at that. That's a lot of responsibility. These are takers. Do not align yourself with takers, but people who will support you and bring you up. It should sound like this. Oh, wow, Linnea, you're going to go out and create a YouTube show? How can I support you? That's great. Man, that's exciting. Man, good for you. Let me know how that's going, man. I'm rooting for you. That's a totally different mindset than... I heard a lot of people are going into YouTube lately. Oh, a real estate show? Aren't a lot of people doing that? How are you going to rise above? All the negativity, and it's like, it's insinuated, right? They're not saying like, hey, you're going to fail, but they might as well. Right.
You might as well just come out and say it. Stop dinking around. Just like say it. You know?
Just saying like, hey, I'm not capable and you don't believe in me.
Right.
And if that's the case, then we have, and where does that usually come from? Our families. Yeah. And we all say like, you can shy away though from those people, even your family. You could put up ground rules that say, you know what? I know exactly where you're at. If you don't have anything positive to say, then I'd appreciate you not saying anything at all.
100%.
Don't let anybody steal your thunder. Don't let anybody cast doubt. Don't let anybody, Evan Carmichael, right? He is notorious for believe.
Right.
Believe in who? Believe in you.
Right.
Like,
That's
don't.
Mm-hmm.
And we as humans, we immediately, like, we want to go out and we immediately want to get like some sort of self, like somebody to like pat ourselves on the back, or we want to look for a business partner. In fact, I was just talking to one of my old high school students, and he was like, oh yeah, I'm thinking about this new company, and I'm thinking I'm going to see if Ivan wants to do it with me. I said, why don't you just do it on your own? Why don't you lead the way? And then if you want to hire Ivan, maybe you'll be able to offer him a job, but you have all the power and knowledge to do it all on your own. And outside of maybe needing somebody to come in and fund what it is that you're doing, that it involves a contract and a very stringent set of rules so that there's clear definitions of what the expectations are on both sides. Outside of that, you can do it on your own. You could put the pieces together. So for your viewers out there that are thinking about buying real estate as an investment, believe that you can do it, read that you can do it, and align with the people who know and believe that you can do it.
On that note, I don't know. That's a great like last final thought. I love that. Okay, well, thank you so much. I want to continue this conversation later because I think there's so much more. I'm like, I want to dig into some of this even more. So thank you so much for being on the show. Anyone that's watching this, just go to porchlightrecovery.com. Check out what Vincent's doing over there. It's a lot of amazing stuff. And subscribe to his podcast, Outside In.
Vincent's journey really reminded me that the real ROI isn't just in dollars, it's in lives changed. So here's my question for you. What is the highest and best use of your skills, your business, and your influence? Leave your thoughts in the comments and let's start that conversation. And Vincent, thank you so much for showing us what it looks like to live that answer. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.